Welcome friends, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com with your thought for the day. I'm sure that most of my audience is familiar with some of the details I'm about to go through in general detail, but there are some important updates, so bear with me as I just go through some chronology to get everyone on board. You might remember back in 1991, a little director by the name of Oliver Stone released a little film by the name of JFK, which had quite an impact on audiences, not just in America, but as a young Canadian boy at that time, I can assure you, had an impact in Canada and elsewhere, and caused quite a bit of public stir about the JFK assassination, nearly 30 years in the past at that time, but still an interesting political subject, and one that propelled Oliver Stone to actually appear before Congress to testify about the records and documents that were still at that time under lock and key classified by the US government relating to the JFK assassination. And that public furor and that testimony and all of the pyrotechnics surrounding that movie ultimately led to the creation, or the passage, I should say, of the JFK Assassination Records Act. Specifically, as you can find out from the National Archives at archives.gov, under the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection, it notes that John F. Kennedy was killed on November 22nd, 1963, and almost 30 years later, Congress enacted the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. And the act mandated that all assassination-related material be housed in a single collection in the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA. Now, that might not sound like all that much, but as they go on to note, there are more than 5 million pages of assassination-related records, including photographs and motion pictures, sound recordings, and artifacts. 2,000 cubic feet of records that are now being stored at the National Archives and that are mostly, most of the records are open for research. Well, that's reassuring. But again, that's a monumental task. So obviously the passage of this act itself pretty much mandated the creation of the Assassination Records Review Board, the ARRB, which kicked off in 1994 and continued its operations until the fall of 1998, going through those millions of documents and going through all sorts of different agencies and being at times quite aggressive in getting some records declassified. And the work of the ARB has been documented by JFK researchers, but and you can go and read the final report and medical testimony and exhibits that reflect on the autopsy and the autopsy photos that we were shown of quote-unquote JFK and all of that kind of goodness. Transcripts, staff files and memos. There's all sorts of information from the ARRB that's been released. And they did the incredible work of putting together those millions of records that are now housed at the National Archives. Some of them you would even know by name. You might have heard of an almost inconsequential to the JFK assassination in particular, at least in a direct sense, document, but one that is absolutely not inconsequential on bigger matters, called Operation Northwoods. That's right. You may have even seen the actual note here from Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to then Secretary of Defense McNamara in March of '62, calling for, of course, the Operation Northwoods plan. Oh, we could do all sorts of things. We could... where's the list of wonderful ideas that they'd... Oh, we could sink a ship near the harbor entrance of Guantanamo, conduct funerals for mock victims. We could blow up a drone, an unmanned vessel anywhere in the Cuban waters. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. And all of those wonderful ideas. So that was exposed and first reported on by James Bamford, but it was this document and the whole plan was really only made known to the public as a result of the work of the Assassination Records Review Board. So there are some pretty important documents that are foundational to what a lot of people have come to understand in the post-9/11 era, that were actually the result of this JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, which actually stems back to the JFK movie back in 1991. Who would have thunk it? But why am I talking about this today? Well, of course, as I'm sure a lot of people know, but let's just go through the actual act itself. If you go and read it, one of the clauses here is that each assassination record shall be publicly disclosed in full and available in the collection no later than the date that is 25 years after the date of enactment of this act. unless the president certifies that its continued postponement is made necessary by identifiable harm to the military, defense, intelligence operations, blah, 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 and the identifiable harm is of such gravity that it outweighs the public interest in disclosure. Gigantic loophole here. But anyway, 25 years after the date of enactment, when was the... Oh, that's right, 1992, October 26, 1992, 25 years? Oh, that's right, that means that all... documents that are related to the assassination that have not been specifically exempted by the president are due to be in that collection by October 26, 2017. So we know that there are documents that have to this time remained fully classified, some of them partially redacted, that are due to be released to the public on October 26, 2017. In fact, we've known about this for some time, and there have been preparations being made for some time for these documents to be released. You can go see even from 2015, the National Archives were talking about, getting ready for this 2017 date and the JFK declassification plans and what they were working on, what they were going to do. So you have a lot of people getting ready. You have 2017jfk.org. The link will be in the show notes in case you need it, but it's simple, 2017jfk.org. An entire website devoted to this declassification that is due to take place on October 26th of this year, just a couple of months now from the time this is being recorded. So they talk a little bit about the history and get involved and why it's important and all sorts of things. But they have, for example, they have a countdown to 2017 section on this website that has some handy-dandy resources, like the fact that there were 3,810 documents that were released by the National Archive earlier this year. Did you know about that? In 2017, so far, there have already been some documents released, and they are collected here in these zip files that you can download and check out for yourself. I did so, and I just downloaded one document randomly, and this is what I got. Completely, utterly illegible nothing. You can almost make out something here about Miami coordinator captured file sent to something 11th April 62, but other than that, it is literally illegible nothing. So thank you to the diligent people who have been diligently, keeping this secret from the public for all these years. You wouldn't want, America's enemies to find out this valuable braille or whatever this is. But there you go. So I just downloaded one of these documents at random, and that's what I got. Presumably, there are other documents in here that are of some importance, and still, there are documents that are yet to be declassified. So this was an article that came out last year about the what we know about what the government is hiding about the JFK assassination, because last year there was a FOIA request by Politico and other news organizations that were demanding a list of the documents themselves, what have been fully withheld about the JFK assassination, and they got the list of 3,063 documents that have been fully withheld and that are due to be released unless specifically exempted on October 26, 2017. And they go through it here. I'll link this so you can see this. They talk about files related to Lee Harvey Oswald, Hoover, and there are a series of communications from the longest-serving and highly secretive FBI director, including one titled Reaction of Soviet and Communist Party Officials to JFK Assassination. Interesting. There's James Jesus Angleton, former CIA chief's still secret testimony to the Church Committee, as well as Frank Sturgis's secret testimony. David Atlee Phillips' secret testimony to the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1978 that, yes, for the record, was the last actual review, the final pronouncement of the U.S. government that did actually find that there was a conspiracy. For spurious reasons, but at any rate, they did find there was a conspiracy. That is the actual official last word of the U.S. government on the matter, just for the record. A document about Regis Kennedy, who died of a heart attack before he could be questioned about his role as a witness to the events in Dallas. But there is a file that is a communication from Regis Kennedy to the special agent in FBI's New Orleans field office on May 18th, 1967. Protected sources, illegible material. documents related to the JFK deemed illegible. Well, I think we've just seen one of those that was released earlier this year, and then others not believed relevant. So there you go. There are various documents that are still being held, but this is interesting. Reaction of Soviet and Communist Party officials to JFK assassination. Or, a telegram about Oswald from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City to the State Department. Oswald, a former Marine who had temporarily defected to the Soviet Union in 1959, as you do, and then waltzed back into the into the U.S., as you do, and pinky swear wasn't working for any intelligence agency, is suspected of having visited Mexico City in the weeks before the assassination, reportedly to obtain a visa to travel to Cuba. Interesting. It seems like there may be something embedded in here, and if that's your suspicion, congratulations, you should win a prize, because this is what Politico is now reporting, how the CIA came to doubt the official story of JFK's murder. And they're talking about the thousands of pages of long secret assassination-related documents released by the National Archives last week. That was in July now. So that is those documents at countdown2017jfk.org, the ones that I randomly downloaded the illegible text from. And they're talking about that release of documents and how it shows an interesting thing. It shows, well, let's just read a little bit of this article. After the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November '63, the CIA appeared eager, even desperate, to embrace the version of events being offered by the FBI, the Secret Service, and other parts of the government. The official story, that a delusional misfit and self-proclaimed Marxist named Lee Harvey Oswald killed the president in Dallas with his $21 mail-order rifle, and there was no evidence of a conspiracy, foreign or domestic. Certainly, the CIA's leaders told the Warren Commission. The CIA's leaders told the Warren Commission. You mean the CIA, the former CIA boss who was sitting on the Warren Commission? You mean that? The independent panel that investigated the murder, there was no evidence of a conspiracy that the spy agency could have foiled, of course. But thousands of pages of long secret assassination-related documents released by the National Archives last week show that within a few years of Kennedy's murder, some in the CIA began to worry internally that the official story was wrong, an alarm the agency never sounded publicly. Well, this is fascinating. I wonder what they're going to say. Specifically, key CIA officials were concerned by the mid-1970s that the agency, the FBI, the Secret Service, and the White House Commission led by Chief Justice Earl Warren had never followed up on important clues about Oswald's contact with foreign agents, including diplomats and spies for the communist governments of Cuba and the Soviet Union, who might have been aware of his plans to kill Kennedy and even encouraged the plot. Although there is no credible evidence cited in the documents released so far that Cuban leader Fidel Castro or other foreign leaders had any personal role in ordering Kennedy's murder. Blah, 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 blah. So, interestingly, this goes on to basically detail, well, there's some documents from the 70s that seem to show that the CIA kind of had their suspicions that there might have been a conspiracy involving Oswald and those pesky Ruskies. Interesting. Also, another interesting little tidbit from this article. In 2013, the CIA's in-house historian concluded that the spy agency had conducted a benign cover-up during the Warren Commission's investigation in 1963 and 1964 in hopes of keeping the commission focused on what the agency believed was the best truth. Now that's a title for you, the best truth. That Lee Harvey Oswald, for as yet undetermined motives, had acted alone in killing John Kennedy. But what if the best truth was wrong? Yeah, good question. But I seem to think that it's interesting that there is this embedded story about, Oswald was actually conspiring with those Ruskies coming along at this particular juncture in history, and just as we're honing in on this 25-year declassification window that's going to see a lot of hype, a lot of interest, a lot of stories are going to be generated, especially in October and then around the time of the assassination. Lots of good, juicy, prime column space, to use an outdated term, for this story to really have legs. If there are some things embedded in these documents that can make a convenient narrative, that maybe it was the Ruskies all along who mind-controlled Lee Harvey Oswald to be, he was a lone nut, he was the lone killer, but he might have had help, encouragement, manipulation of some sort by the Ruskies and their friends in Cuba. An interesting story, one that, in fact, I think observant students of the JFK assassination will know has been embedded in the story for quite a while. Going back several years, you can find, for example, in the Telegraph, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the finger points to the KGB. Nearly 50 years on, a new book suggests that assassin Lee Harvey Oswald was guided by hardline Stalinist dissidents. So, I mean, there's so many things embedded in here, but keep in mind, ultimately, it reinforces the narrative of the Warren Commission. I mean, the Warren Commission is technically correct. It was Lee Harvey Oswald that fired the magic bullet, and all of that is absolutely correct. But what they missed was he was guided by hardline Stalinist dissidents, pointing the finger back at Russia at an interesting time in history. One in which one would imagine there would be no direct political consequences, even if it were to be the actual new conclusion of the U.S. government or anyone else that it was the Ruskies. I mean, one would assume that would not necessarily influence diplomatic relations between Washington and Moscow, but I mean, it would be interesting in the current political climate, wouldn't it? And in fact, this was embedded almost from the very beginning. If you go back to the formation of the Warren Commission, there was a lot of arm twisting that was going on behind the scenes of Johnson trying to get various people to sit on the Warren Commission to be a rubber stamp for the predetermined conclusion that Oswald was a lone nut. And we can hear that in the tape of the phone call in which LBJ announces to Senator Russell that, hey, oh, by the way, I've already announced you're going to be on this commission. Russell says, no, thanks, I don't really want to be. And Johnson says something to the effect, you can go and listen to the tape for yourself, but it was something to the effect of, I'm not going to sick the FBI on you, but you are going to sit on this commission. Yes, sir. How high, sir? So that was an interesting conversation, and he alluded in that phone call to the possibility of 40 million Americans dying in a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union, ... unless the Warren Commission that you're going to sit on is going to come to the predetermined conclusion that Oswald acted alone and had no ties to the Ruskies or anyone else. Do you hear? So that was in fact, what LBJ was using as his stick to get people to cooperate at the time. He was basically saying, oh, you might find something about Oswald and Soviets, and if that happens, then, you know, I mean, it's a coup that's taking place, that is the Soviets assassinated, I mean, directly or indirectly, the president of the U.S., that is war during the height of the Cold War, that's going to be a nuclear exchange, millions are going to die. And that adds light to the story of how LBJ convinced Warren himself, who was reticent to head up this commission to serve. And again, LBJ alluded to the 40 million Americans dying unless Warren did his work, i.e. came to the correct conclusion, the best truth, if you will. So, I mean, this is interesting, and it's very reminiscent, I would say, for my audience, of the 28 pages. We all remember the big brouhaha surrounding the release of the 28 pages and how that, you know, the big revelation after all those years of struggling by those 9/11 truthers like Bob Graham and other people who were part of the 9/11 cover-up in the first place, who were so concerned about the truth getting out about the 28 pages that, you know, now, I mean, it's not really officially anything, but we all know it was the Saudis. The Saudis did 9/11. The Saudis financed it all because of the 28 pages, right? And that's where it starts and ends. That's how you embed something in documents that you then classify, and then later on you unclassify, you declassify when it's convenient. And here is this narrative: Oswald went to Mexico City and met with the Ruskies and the Cubans, and he was being secretly directed. Again, a story that was embedded from the very beginning and then redacted to come to the point at some point in the future when they need to, they declassify it, and there's your ready-made next layer of the onion of their ridiculous story of the JFK assassination. So, to get more into it, again, this is going to revolve around Lee Harvey Oswald and who he really was and how many there really were. Almost certainly there was at least one doppelganger that was going around making scenes. I've gone through this in my episode on Meet Lee Harvey Oswald, Sheep Dip Patsy. I suggest you refamiliarize yourself with that in the run-up to this 25-year anniversary, or 25-year declassification countdown that's going on right now. I would also, if there are any intrepid Corbett reporters who want to go through any of these files, you don't have to go through them all, but if there's any that you just want to randomly download and take a look through, I mean, obviously there have been a lot of people going through them by this point, but you never know what might be in here. But as I say, they're not. We're not going to get the signed, sealed, and delivered, assassination. The memo coming from the CIA or whatever, let's ace Kennedy. You're not going to get that smoking gun. All you're going to get from this, there are things that can come out of this, absolutely, like Operation Northwoods, that are important for understanding the world. But there's also going to be a lot of embedded little mini narratives that have been planted there from the beginning, little trapdoors for us to fall through. And I just think it's interesting that this is all coming out now around the time when all this hype is going to be generated about this 25-year mark. So, guaranteed, within the next couple of months, you're going to see a lot of stories around this, and you're going to see some that will start linking this to the Russians, the Ruskies. Maybe the Russians killed JFK. Again, interesting just considering the political climate we're living through. So I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention, get people ready for the psyop that is coming, and that we can already see the outlines of. It's already being talked about by places like Politico. I find it particularly disturbing that all of this coverage about these documents is coming from Politico, which was founded, I think, 2007 by a couple of Washington Post defects, with money from a financier who also donates to the Clinton Foundation, of course, and whose first writer, their first hire, was Gary Allen's son, Mike Allen. Gary Allen, of course, none dare call it conspiracy. So I don't even know how those kinds of connections work, but at any rate, there's some interesting things coming out about this. I'm obviously going to have my eye on it. I would love if the Corbett reporters out there who have their eye on this as well share any links or info as they become available in the comment section, and also go through any of these documents, see what you can find. Again, I leave it open to the community to find more information about this. So there you go. The countdown is on. What will be revealed, quote unquote, by this declassification? Stay tuned for more. CorbettReport.com.